Welcome to the 3 Knockdown Rule.
And welcome to Quick Jabs on 3 Knockdown Rule, brought to you by Hustler Casino. Alright guys, here's what's taking place. Mario Lopez is on assignment filming his latest Christmas movie. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing evergreen shows. This week will feature Ring Magazine editor Doug Fisher and the great Jim Lampley. They will take a week off, and Mario will be back in play, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. So I'm going to be doing some more quick jabs to kind of fill in the void during Mario's hiatus. So let's get started here. And obviously the big news, Friday night, the news came, and to me it was a stunner, given the fact that George Foreman seemed to be very youthful, with great energy, and he had a great spirit to him still. The last time we had seen him on social media, but it turns out that he had gone through some health issues the past year or so, and he sadly passed away at the age of 76. Certainly a great loss for the sport of boxing and pop culture in America. As a prize fighter, what else can really be said? Came from the greatest era of heavyweights and then reinvented himself to win the heavyweight title 20 years apart. Now, I don't think that'll ever be done again. And just think about this. This is a guy that fought Ollie, Norton, and Frazier, and then eventually fought the likes of Holyfield, Tommy Morrison, and Michael Moore. And in my view, is a top 5 heavyweight of all time. Ended his career with the record of 76-5, 68 knockouts. But more than just a prize fighter, he became America's favorite pitchman and a vital part of pop culture. He's the type of guy that not only did the hardcore fans know of him, but grandmothers in middle America, blue-collar workers in the Southwest, stockbrokers in New York, gardeners, plumbers, any type of working class people knew of him, and they thought very highly of him. A very friendly, jovial figure. Certainly a 180 from the surly individual he was during his first heavyweight run. And then he also, in his last real regular job in front of America, was a very interesting and colorful commentator for HBO Sports. He used to madness with some of the things that he said, but his folksy humor kept us entertained, and generally most people liked it. So rest in peace to Big George Foreman, whose contribution to America and the sport of boxing will never be forgotten. And moving on with quick jabs, and I don't want this to be overshadowed. The next day on Saturday, we got more bad news. Livingstone Bramble, at the age of 64, passed away. Kevin Iole was the first to report on it. Now certainly Bramble did not have the social impact that a George Foreman had, but for me personally, he was part of a group or a generation of fighters in the 80s that really I grew up on and helped foster my love of the sport. I'll never forget, it was a summer night in 1984. I think it was in Buffalo. It was on a syndicated broadcast out here in LA. I was living in Valencia, California as a young kid. This unknown Bramble upset Ray Boom Boom Mancini, who at the time had only one loss to Alexis Arguello and was one of the most popular fighters in the sport. And Bramble's one of the first fighters I've ever seen that switch hit from southpaw to orthodox, and he did it very effectively. And then he won a very contested rematch in Reno, Nevada. I believe that fight was on HBO about 6-7 months later, and was never really quite the same guy after getting stopped by Edwin Rosario in one of his title defenses. But rest in peace to Livingstone Bramble. Certainly a very honest, solid fighter that contributed to my love of the sport, and his contributions, they should not be forgotten by boxing fans. All right, so we had some boxing this weekend at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. Sebastian Fundora took care of Cordell Booker in 4 rounds in defense of his WBC and WBO titles. Look, he did what he's supposed to. This was no surprise. He was a very, very heavy favorite, and that's exactly the way the fight played out. Now, what I found was interesting is during the weekend, the WBO had made it very clear that the undefeated 22-year-old Xander Zayas is not only the mandatory, but they have 20 days to make a deal, and that the next fight has to be for Fundora, Xander Zayas, if he wants to keep the WBO belt. Folks, this is what sanctioning bodies are supposed to do. Enforce their own rules, follow their regulations and make fights happen that otherwise would not. Because let's look at the politics. One guy's with PBC, the other one's with Top Rank. They don't break bread often until they have to. But there is an out, though. Keep this in mind. Sebastian Fundora has 2 belts. The WBC seems to play a lot of ball with them. Maybe he says, you know what, I don't need the WBO belt, and maybe it becomes vacant. But the reality is this. Maybe he does vacate the belt. Maybe he does fight Zayas. Or maybe he says, you know what, I'm just going to take on Bakram Murtalazayev and unify another title. I mean, when I'm hearing the name that Jermel Charlo might come back, I'm like, geez, are we going to recycle that? Anyway, the reality is this. Sebastian Fundora has to take on Xander Zayas if he wants to keep the WBO title in his possession. It'll be interesting to see what decision he makes next. And finally, on quick jabs on 3 knockdown rule, also on this card from the Mandalay Bay, Elijah Garcia won a split decision in 10 rounds over veteran Terrell Gaucher. Folks, as that old saying goes, nuts and bolts, Gaucher got screwed. What a bad decision, folks. I know some of you might have had it close. I certainly did not. I believe that Gaucher counterpunched beautifully. He was the more precise puncher down the middle. He floored Garcia early. And yeah, Garcia was busier at times. But again, you take a look at that word precision and accuracy. The harder, more effective punches were consistently landed by Gaucher. And when it was 10 rounds was over, I said there's no way they could take this from Gaucher. That's exactly what they did. And let's take a look at the politics here. Garcia's the younger guy. He's Mexican. He might have more upside. He's the Mexican guy, so maybe they feel as though they can market him as compared to the old warhorse that is the 37-year-old Gaucher. Folks, I should have seen this coming. I was awfully naive. But there is that old phrase that comes to mind once again in situations like this. Fighters fight for today. Judges and referees fight for tomorrow. Well, that's it for this edition of Quick Jabs, brought to you by 3 Knockdown Rule. And welcome to Quick Jabs on 3 Knockdown Rule, brought to you by Hustler Casino. Alright guys, here's what's taking place.